Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Virtual Edition Fair VIP Tour. My name is Nicole Garten, and I'm the Fair Director for the Other Art Fair Los Angeles. As part of the Fair's Virtual Reality Edition presented by Saatchi Art, we're thrilled to be presenting over 100 extremely talented emerging and independent artists from around the world, all eager to connect with you about their work. In navigating the Fair's three-dimensional virtual environment, you'll be able to discover and learn more about the works on view, request a video chat with any artist, save your favorites for easy reference, and make any purchases simply by clicking on the Buy This Artwork link that appears when you click on a particular artwork. That will take you to the Saatchi Art website where you can make seamless and secure checkout purchases. If you have any questions about navigating the fair or making a purchase, please don't hesitate to reach out to us at the fair. Today, I'm very excited to introduce to you the works of three artists, Anna Wingfield, Ralph Lazar, and Justin John. So I'm going to start us off by hopping over into room 3, which is where you'll find Anna's work. So as I navigate here, let's wait for the fair to load. So if you haven't had a chance to walk around the fair virtually yet, there's this really handy guide at the side where you can pull up the drop down of artists and jump directly to any artist's booth within the fair. I'm going to scroll down and find Anna. There you are. We'll give that a second to load. I'm going to back us up so you can get a bit of a perspective. Here we are. Anna, if you want to join, turn on your camera and we'll introduce you. Hi, Anna.
Hi, how's it going?
Good, welcome.
Thank you. Happy to be
So
here.
beautiful stand. I'm really excited that you brought these works to show with everyone. And I think it's also a great idea that you chose a dark wall because you're illustrating both the paper and then the part of your work. So I love how you put this together. But before we get super underway, I wanted to give you a chance to introduce yourself and kind of let people know a bit about your background and how you got started as an artist.
Yeah, absolutely. Hello, I'm Anna. I started doing art from a very, very young age. We traveled a lot as a family. Both my parents are scientists, and so we get to travel the world. And my dad would always have a sketchbook with him, recording any wildlife he saw and all the colors so he could kind of go back and do his work, but also on an artistic level. So he would always show me how to mix paints and colors from what he's drawn on our travels and then back home. Fast forward to being rebellious in high school, I did a lot of stencils and tagging around my neighborhood, but it was like the act of carving an image or cutting one out and having the negative image as a final piece on a wall or whatever, and that is how I found printmaking. It's very much the same concept. And so I went to school and at Goucher College and Goldsmiths University in London to study printmaking. And it was there that I found all the different types of printmaking, but specifically etching and intaglio, where you're using copper plates and you're decaying them and etching your image into it. And then that's what you're printing. And I was fascinated with the whole ritual of inking and then putting it through the press and having this like physical reminder of what you were thinking or creating at the end. So after I graduated, I moved up to New York City and I was working at the Students Arts League of New York City. And I was kind of just stuck with etching and intaglio. And it was there that I kind of fell into monotypes kind of by accident. And it was that they're more a way for me to express and get what I'm feeling down onto the plate, which is, it's more of a painterly version of printmaking. It was like this nice combination of everything that I learned into what I'm doing now. And so fast forward to here I am now in Los Angeles, and I've styled my own term of ink wiping and monotypes. And this is what I have for you today.
Fantastic. I love that. Quite a journey.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think it's fun. You mentioned you call them ink wipes, which is a term that you've kind of invented to describe what you're doing. And I wondered if you could tell us, you know, what is your process? Obviously, people who are familiar with printmaking kind of know how you might go about it, but you've actually built a press as well. Can you tell us a bit about that? Like what drove you to do that? And then how does that figure in? Like, why was it necessary for you to do that? And then, how does it make your work unique to you?
Absolutely. So yeah, monotypes are the Painterly version of printmaking. And so instead of what I was doing before, where you're carving into a wood block or a lino cut or even copper, you're building ink and layers on top of the plate. And from there, I was able to take these copper plates that I've been using. They're all necessarily flat, there's no image on them, but they are weathered from being used over and over and over again. So there's natural scratches and whatnot on the plate. But I'm building ink and you're kind of painting your image. It's all very abstract. And I was doing these wipes, and it's kind of a combination of this like rigorous control of stopping and then, very impulsive movements, which is, I feel, a lot of painters use in their work, but it's still traditional printmaking. So it's this nice kind of collaboration between the two. And one of the most important things in printmaking is the press, because you can't hand press them because it's still very tacky ink, and you need force to peel the image off onto the paper. So I lost access to the press I was using when I first moved to LA, and I was just like, I can't do my art without a press. And so we found a guy up in Canada selling these blueprints, and I was just like, okay, well, if I'm going to build a press, I want to tailor it specifically for what I do. So it's now the biggest press I've ever worked on, so I can go as big as I want. But it also allows me to have the time and the space to create this image, because each one is unique. And so I'm painting and I have the time to create, and then I can go straight to the press. Whereas it's a little bit different if you're doing etching, you have the same image and you're just inking it and you're printing, you're doing series of 100 or whatever. So each one is unique. It needs time to be created and then printed. So I was able to build that.
What a feat. Yeah. I mean, I'm sure the technical know-how that went into just building something is entirely different from actually making the work, but you're probably have so much more control to the degree where like, oh, this hinge is too loose, or I want to create this effect.
Yeah.
That's so exciting. I know, I mean, having grown up in and around LA and being exposed to so many different printmaking processes that are happening around the world, but even here in Los Angeles, there's so many different print shops that just have their own kind of unique signature style. So it's cool to think that you've kind of made your own mark, so to speak, in that landscape of like, okay, you're here and this is, what you're all about. I wanted to know too, in terms of your colors and like the types of inks that you're using and just your compositional choices, where are you looking for inspiration? Is it kind of coming from within, or are you looking at other things as well?
Yeah, it's a little bit of both. I mean, going back to when I was traveling with my parents and seeing my dad record what he was finding on our trips, I go out, I walk my dog, I go about my day, and anything that kind of sparks inspiration, I record as a color palette. And so I have kind of a lexicon of all these moments that are translated into color that I then can take back to the studio and recreate that moment. So any multi-sensory moments where, light, color, touch, sound, everything is kind of mixed together, and it's this overstimulating moment, but it's beautiful and powerful, it's fleeting. And I'd strive to preserve that and recreate it when I'm making my ink wipes. And it's from that I'm able to then, go back and look on what I have and still have like physical reminders of everything, which is.
I love that.
Yeah.
So it's like you're documenting, your observations in the world, translating it through your expression style, and then you have a physical reminder of that one moment. Even if you use the same colors and tried to recreate it, it would always be different because each one, like the contact between the press and the ink and the paper and everything, it just always comes out different. That's so interesting.
Mhm.
I wanted to ask you which works, can you kind of dive us in on a few of these? Which one should we look at? And maybe you can kind of talk us through the stories behind some of them.
Absolutely. I mean, we can start with color and cadence, the two large pieces on the
Okay.
right. Yeah. That's actually a series of three. And I was really interested in creating like a tempo to my artwork. And so I created a color palette of kind of muted tones and how was I able to, through my ink wiping process and the colors and the textures, if I could create almost a tempo to my work, kind of touching again on like all the senses of what inspires me. And even though this is on paper and it's just ink and paper, can I create almost a sound and a rhythm to it?
Mm,
Um, so it's I have this one and the one next door, and next door, right to the right.
there we go.
They're both, similar color palettes, but they're very, very different. And you have this movement and layers that kind of, for me, I can hear it, but I hope.
Yeah, no, it does come across. I feel like um, there's elements of motion and then just the texture and the colors, they all are so evocative. And of course, everyone's kind of experiences of visual and color stimulus is so different. So it would be
Exactly.
interesting to see like if you were to play some sounds, like which sounds do you associate with this? So how the other person or the viewer experiences it might be
Mhm.
different. But these are fantastic. I wonder too, just as we can see a layering effect, in terms of this sort of double horizontal band going across, was that what you had applied last on the ink wipe, or is that, I'm trying to think through in your process of layering the inks or the paints?
Yeah, I mean, it definitely is very many different layers. And so, I mean, you can start at the top where it's just a very kind of light blue gray that's very much rubbed away. And so I have kind of a base layer of that. And I use Charlatan that you use in traditional printmaking. And I start kind of wiping away things, but you have kind of a base layer. And then you start adding, from here, I think I remember it with the blues and then the browns on the bottom. And then the inks, I'm using oil-based etching ink. So it's tacky, but it will mold in with or meld in with the other colors, but you really have to work it in. So, I mean, that's also another aspect of ink wiping. You're pushing these colors together
Mm.
and then scraping things away, rubbing things in, blending it. So you're really using these kind of painterly techniques of adding layers of paint and, using um, things to kind of meld them together. And then I have these two wipes that are going across, and that's definitely the last kind of wipe there. But then I also use some chemicals to kind of disperse the ink away. So that's how you kind of get those bubbly effects. But that
Um,
also makes the ink kind of run together as well. So you get another layer of inks kind of muddling together and making new colors. And yeah, but there's lots and lots
it's
of layers.
like you've got engineering, the physical aspects of it, and then the chemical aspects of it. You can see, I don't know if your parents are in that sort of science, but you, the scientific thing is coming through.
They study
Um,
birds, but
okay. Classification. Yeah, okay. Let's look at this one as well, because I really like these smaller works. They're a bit more quiet and kind of draw you in. So I wonder
Mhm.
how you approach scale in terms of your work.
Yeah, I mean, this is my medium size, and this was it's I mean, it's definitely a different approach because you have a smaller surface on the copper plate. I believe is only a 10-inch diameter for this one, and so using too much color or too much movement, things are kind of going to get a little bit too hectic. And the sense and the memory, what I'm trying to portray in this kind of it's just it can be too much. So here this is called Sharp, and this is a memory based off of one of the beaches I grew up nearby in the Pacific Northwest. And it's having those feelings of walking to the beach, it's cold, you can smell the air, and the beaches in the Pacific Northwest are cold. And so you get this salty, cold air, and it's sharp and it's stinging. And I wanted to really create how that feels based on a memory, but also on a flat surface with color. So using lots of blues and grays and kind of a little bit of browns that I know if they start kind of running together or, you know, in the printing process get layered on top of each other, they're still going to come through and it's not going to just be one kind of dark blob, but being conscious of the colors and if they can go together.
Mm. It's funny because as you are talking about this one, suddenly I can't help but see a landscape. Like it seems very much presented as, okay, there's like the horizon line, maybe some sky and clouds in the background, and then a beach in the foreground. Mm-hmm. And I don't know if it's just like intentional or the evocations of the colors, but it really comes through where now suddenly I can totally see it.
Yeah, I mean, that's another thing with my art. They're all very much based on my emotion and my memories and my feelings. But you know, people's perceptions are all going to be objective. And looking into it, I really hope that they're able to pull, if it's, you know, something familiar, if they see a landscape or a color or a texture, and it kind of evokes this nostalgia of a time or place when they kind of felt or saw the same. I really hope that the viewers can interact with it in their own way and have their own experience. So if you see the landscape, or if you just see something very abstract or this like sharp shape in the middle, whatever that's going to be, I hope that speaks and takes you somewhere else to that
it
place.
Definitely does. Yeah, I love that. Well, this has been fantastic, Anna. Thank you so much for telling us more about your works. And I definitely encourage everyone to come check her out in room 3. And, you know, she's available for video chat as well. So
yes,
take advantage of that.
Let's chat.
Well, thank you, Anna. I'm going to head back to the entrance here.
Great.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye. I'm going to head into room 1 for a very different, although I actually do find some connections between your works. I'm going to take us to Ralph Lazar's booth. As you can see, it's really easy to navigate around, and it feels very much like we're at a fair when you're walking through. Okay, let's see here. Here we are. So as I said, we're in room 1, and this is Ralph Lazar's stand, which looks very tidy. Ralph, if you want to turn on your video and join us. Hi, how are you?
Very good, thank you.
I think.
You think my booth looks tidy?
You. Well, your booth is always tidy, but usually in our live events, there's so many more works there, and you've got your Lyle stacked up. So this feels slightly different, but yes. It's fun to see all the works you've been working on. And I see a few of the works even behind you here. So like this one, are you there in your studio?
Yes.
So for those who aren't familiar with you and your work, do you want to kind of kick us off by telling us a bit about your background and how you kind of came to be making these works?
Sure. So I'm South African. I grew up in South Africa. I studied law and economics, and then studied in London. I moved to London and landed up in investment banking in London for several years. And then I met Lisa, who's now my wife, who some of you know, because she also shows at the other art fair. Mm-hmm. And she convinced me to give up the life of finance and move into the life of art. So for several years, we ran a licensing business where we would create cartoon worlds, mainly for kids, and we'd license the content to a range of different media, mainly books actually, but quite a bit of animated stuff, internet stuff, and lots of merchandise. And then after several years, we had kids and they started growing up, and we wanted, Lisa is also South African, we wanted to give them a South African type lifestyle, and London was not offering that. So we moved to California. And after about 5 years in California, I started getting really interested in the US politics, the Constitution, and the Supreme Court in particular, because we never studied anything about those in South Africa or in the UK. And politics in the US started becoming more divisive. Our licensing business was going well, and I wanted to get into more of a fine art daily routine. So I started reading the Constitution, and while reading it, I decided I wanted to make a piece of art out of it. So my first piece of art, which is not on this booth, was I wrote out every single word of the US Constitution over the course of several months. Each word was about that size. I'd throw them in a box. Each one was cut out. And after 6 months, I had a box this size with the full Constitution inside it, 4,500 words. And if you shook the box, the Constitution would change. And so it became randomized. So that piece was called Reconstitution. And the point of that was the words are, anyone can take the words and change them to their own interpretation. So that piece, I had it the first art show I ever did was the Other Art Fair, probably 2 years ago, maybe 3, 2 or 3, I think, 2 years ago. And that piece was up, and it sold pretty quickly. And suddenly I was an artist. So what I do mainly is I contemporaneously record the news. So I recorded the full Trump presidency, every detail of it, in excruciating detail, consistently over that period. So I pre-prepare thousands of small vignettes, little paintings, some with words in them, some without, and lots of little patterns like leaves and faces. They all live in a library. And then when the news happens, I add words to them and compile bigger pieces in real time, and then frame them up. And that's it. So that's the background.
Wow, so much, and you've condensed it so well. So so people can see what it is you're talking about. Which is a good one that I should zoom in on so that they can get a sense?
Let's zoom in on the back wall, the smaller one above that world map.
Okay. I remember this. This happened recently.
So there are really two kinds of pieces that I do in terms of contemporaneous recording. If there's a once-off event that's substantial, for instance, this interview with Trump, where he made this quote, I wanted to dedicate a piece to it. So that piece is one moment in time. If you zoom out, and you go to the middle one on the bottom.
This here?
Yeah. So that is the storming of the Capitol. Just the main summary of what happened on that day. Just to the right of it is another piece. I did 3 or 4 pieces about that day. So also the main headlines from the news on that day. The aim is that the piece is a historical snapshot. I try to be unbiased. I only use 4 data news sources because there's potential for, just information overload. So I use the BBC, Fox News, CNN, and the New York Times. So if you zoom out again, then I do a different thing where if something or someone I feel is important and should, merits a mention, Kaepernick has, a dedicated piece about him. It's got no words on it. It's just a picture. If you move that way, so towards that map onto the next wall, the small wall, the vote piece I did in the days running up to the election. The piece above it. Sorry, am I going too quickly?
No, this is perfect. I can keep up.
The piece above it is about referendums on anything. The referendums really have been the biggest question over the last 6 years, whether it be Brexit or COVID or who you vote for. The one to the side of it is called freedom or equality. That's been a huge issue in the States of whether, whether the Democrat-Republican divide is essentially about this question. So this piece addresses that.
And for people who haven't seen these in person, I mean, you mentioned how you have these cutouts that you're, painting on top of with words and images. This is a real dimensional piece. It's not flat by any means. You've got sort of, I guess, the base surface, but then you've got these shapes that are then layered on top of it. So it really comes out into the 3-dimensional space.
That's right. And when I first started, I was just using Amazon boxes and USPS boxes. But now the problem with those is they degrade over time. So now I use backing board. It's acid free, proper fancy backing board that won't degrade over time. And then each piece has 4 layers of varnish on them. So the final thing, although very three-dimensional, is actually pretty, it's almost made solid by multiple layers of acrylic varnish.
I love it. So you say you limit, your news sources just because of information overload, but you also limit your palette fairly much as well. So what sort of significance do you attach around blue or then black for these things? Do they have sort of emotional signifiers or sort of tonal?
No. The only significance is I'm absolutely terrible with color. I've never worked with color. I've only started working with color since Biden became president, and that's unrelated. I've just started a whole experiment with smaller, very colorful pieces. So up until this point, the blacks, they're 5 tones of gray and then black and white on either end. And then the blue and yellow ones are a palette that Lisa chose because I'm hopeless. And it works very well because you can reverse stuff out nicely, and white and black work on it. Go on.
Should we, are these the newer pieces you are referencing? Because these are definitely, we haven't seen these before. And I wondered, let me back up a bit. Tell us what was inspiring this new series, and then let's go into them. I'm gonna back up and stand over here and then swivel.
So this new series is an experimentation in color, and it's really an exploration of semiotics and symbols. So I love symbols. When you buy a box, something in a cardboard box, if you look on the side, on average, they have 5 little symbols, a wine glass and a little umbrella, arrows, and then if it's containing something, emojis. I grew up in South Africa, as I said. Rock art is full of symbols, which took generations to try and disentangle, and they're finally doing it now. So these pieces are really a combination of all of that. So what I'm looking at are universal symbols, and then ideographic writing systems. So systems that don't really have words, but that have images. And in that universe, you get 2 kinds of symbols. You get representational symbols and you get abstract symbols. Representational symbols are something like a steam engine, a picture of a steam engine or a bicycle. If you see a sign with a bicycle, it's a cycle car. You see a picture of you driving in your car. If you see a steam engine, anyone in the world, anyone knows that means there's a train. So the representational symbols are literal. Then you get abstract symbols, which have no meaning, but most humans now know what they mean. So for example, the radioactive symbol, nothing to do with neutrons or explosions, but we all know what it means. So I'm keeping these pieces enigmatic. I'm not going to explain each one, but each one actually has a little thing that you can disentangle, and they're thematically consistent. So these guys you see here are quite small. So if you look behind me, that's the orange one. The orange one you see on the screen is on the floor behind me, but there are actually studies for much bigger ones. So I'll bring some big ones to the fair.
Fantastic. Okay, I'm going to go down to the second row here. So yeah, this one, significantly less words, as you say, because it's reliant more on symbols. So people can decipher and try to figure out what it is that's going on here. But definitely really evocative and really exciting to see this new direction for your work.
Great.
I wonder too, just in kind of wrapping up, what is it that you hope people come away with from your work? I mean, of course, it's certainly documenting history and a snapshot in time, but I wonder, what do you think that the viewer feels or takes away from seeing your work?
Oh, that's a great question. There are multiple things that happen with my art. People often the pieces have a timestamp on them. So there'll be a date range during which time I made it. So people will sometimes buy those because they were doing something significant. I can give you an example. Someone near us is a bond trader, and when COVID happened, he couldn't work at his bank in San Francisco. So he built an office in his garden, and he has a whole trading system there. He works for one of the big investment banks. but there was a 2-week window over which they built the office. It was in May last year. So he came to my studio and he bought a piece over that date range. Then people buy them as infographics if they are conversation starters and historically significant. And then pieces like Kaepernick or, you know, once-off quotes people will buy because they're memorable. Every piece gets numbered and goes into a book, which is continually updated on Amazon. It's self-published. So the main aim is to record history. How people use them when they get home is up to them.
Well, as a one-time history major myself, I'm certainly fascinated, and I love, you know, the tactile documentation of this fleeting media that is coming in over people's airwaves, but then you're really giving it physical, tangible form, which is such an interesting practice, especially in the 24-hour news cycle when so much of it, you know, is forgotten. You've really paused and made people slow down and reckon with things, which you know, I guess we should always be mindful of doing. So, gosh, this is so fascinating. I always learn more from you, Ralph. So thank you so much for sharing with us.
You're welcome. Thanks, Nicole.
Okay, continuing on our tour, I'm going to, let's see, I think I took us back to the entrance. I'm going to go back into room 1 where we're going to chat with Justin Chon. So let's kind of refresh here. Hi, Justin.
Hello.
Good to see you. While
too.
this is loading up, let me pull you up here. Okay. Here we go. So moving away from representational work, we've got a lot more abstraction going on in your stand. So again, beautiful presentation. This looks so fun. I love how you've laid this out. You've got a combination of paintings and then prints as well. So before we dive into the specifics, do you want to just kind of give people an intro on your background and sort of how you became an artist?
Sure, yeah. I mean, I guess I feel like I've always been an artist from day one. Always doing art from family stuff on through grade school, and in high school I just remember like I lived in the art department. And then I went to college for graphic design, and I studied at Maryland Institute College of Art in Baltimore, and just got fully into design, which then led me to Washington, D.C., where I did that for a while. But then things shifted and I took, or I got sucked into the retail world doing a lot of merchandising and then interior stuff. So that's what I sort of attribute like doing this sort of display work to. But then I ended up moving to Boise, Idaho, which is where I live now, and started getting back into painting just as like a side thing, doing it just because I felt I had to, and then ultimately full-time, and I've been doing that for about, I guess, 3 years full-time now.
Wow, fantastic. It's really cool because I think, as you said, your merchandising background, certainly you can see elements of that here, but a lot of your works have such texture too. And I know texture and this composition and all of those types of things come through. So we'll get into that in a second. I wanted to ask you too about your use of color and, you know, the mixed media works. And I'm wondering, how do you approach your painting? Let me zoom in on it. Should we start with this one maybe?
From childhood, a great many of us are raised.
Yeah, so a lot of them have audio elements involved. And then there's a few of them have video elements involved too. So yeah, if you click on them, they'll actually just start playing. So hopefully that doesn't get too intrusive into this part. But yeah, and this was my first experimenting with audio sound stuff. I just sort of thought it would be a fun element to sort of add another layer, if you will, to everything. Wait, what was the question again?
Oh, so how do you, when you're starting a work, you know, what decisions are you making, or what have you planned in advance, if you do plan in advance, with regard to composition and color? I guess, how do you approach each new work?
It's there, it shifts and changes a lot, but ultimately I usually get stuck on a color pattern or scheme, if you will, which I pull from everywhere. I mean, I'm influenced by like just everything, you know, gives me inspiration. But a lot of the like choices I'm making are in the moment. They is just what comes natural to me. It's like sometimes it's like going with what like the paint feels like it needs to do. I don't know. I know it sounds really like I don't know what the word is for that, but uh, I definitely just kind of like go with the flow a lot of times. But there are times that I'm very much keeping with certain like elements I know I want to incorporate. Like I incorporate the square a lot, which is fairly obvious by just the shape alone. But and then there's a little bit of abstract iconography happening. And there's a lot of figures involved. Like I do incorporate a lot of like human elements, but very abstract. And yeah.
I wondered, so one thing that is not immediately clear for people watching this is your titles are so provocative. Like this one is called The Disservice of Disarming Prince Charming, which when you're looking at it from the outset, it's like, okay, there's more going on here thematically than maybe would be immediately clear. So do you want to tell people a bit about like what themes or ideas you're thinking about as you're making this work?
Sure. So, well, ultimately with every abstract piece, since they are in nature abstract, I am well aware that people are going to take away all different kinds of things, and that is perfectly all right. Art is subjective and everyone has their own interpretation. But but what I was doing, like in particular with this one, while it actually has a political sort of side to it, being just the red, white, and blue aspect, but then adding in those pink and purplish gray tones go with the dialogue of gender roles. So which is what I was playing with here, and certain stereotypes and archetypes that we're brought up with from childhood in fairy tales. And I can't even remember where the exact idea came from with this. Sometimes they just pop into my head. But yeah, I do incorporate a lot of political messages, a lot of things with sexuality, gender roles, as I said, as well as mental health issues and stuff like depression, things of that nature.
I see, yeah, absolutely. This one, like this one, let's get close here. I'm just gonna play.
That one doesn't have an element, so you can click on it.
Okay. The texture here is so cool. I mean, you almost have sort of a grid going in terms of the stroke. Are you using a palette knife with some of this?
So this one, yes, I do use palette knives a lot. I have many different kinds. This particular one is actually a very long one that is, I think, technically more for laying pavement and cement on the ground. But it's essentially as wide as that canvas is. But then I come back in with the other sizes and to get different, more minor elements. But this one, I do a lot of layering. Like each piece probably, it's like sometimes it can take up to 2 years because it's just, I don't know. Sometimes they're just not ready yet. And this one, yeah, it definitely has a grid, but then I like to break the grid. And then as you can see with the splotching of paint and other things on there, yeah.
Yeah, I love this one. I mean, it's definitely like presenting on the one hand a sense of order, but then you've kind of let other layers beneath come through and kind of interact with the surface. And then the textures, especially with the pink drops, it's really cool to see just the different push and pull across texture, warm and cool colors, and all of this. These are fantastic.
Yeah, I guess it's the pentimento is the sort of, I guess, art term for that, of just the layering, and then you see the original painting underneath sort of showing through still with, so it's very layered.
These are so great. Tell us too, can we talk about some of these works? Was this one?
So that one has no audio, so but you can let it the visual play. Yeah, so these are my digital paintings, if you will. I recently got an iPad last year during the pandemic, and I, as a designer, still very much use Photoshop and all things Adobe, and so I started playing with Fresco, and so one of the cool things is that it records everything you're doing. So it has these little time lapse of the artwork, which I didn't actually know was a thing at first. So then I made these little movies. But I start with an image with these, usually something I've taken a picture of, and I just will keep layering and layering, layering. I initially was using it to do sort of just sketching out something I was going to make in real life, but then just found like just the endless opportunities with it. So, and these are created very large, which actually was shutting down my iPad, which, but yeah, so they're very big, so it's able to print them very large and keep the quality.
Wow, and just looking at what's behind these as the backdrop for your booth, is that sort of like a super, super close up of something you've created digitally?
This one, yeah, it's actually the one on the left.
This one.
It's the same, yeah, it's the same one.
So
Just
this,
I've taken it into Photoshop and created a halftone moire pattern out of it, just to add, again, another layer.
that is so cool. And you can really see, like, it looks like this is mostly gray and a little bit of yellow, but then when you really zoom in, you can see, oh, look, there's, you know,
Yeah,
the beauty.
yeah, that would,
print.
yeah, be like the print process, like doing the dots. Yeah, that would be how that would be made.
God, that's so fascinating. Does this one play when I? Yeah.
It does the same thing. There it goes.
Wow. I didn't realize that this recorded the entire process, which is so fascinating because you can kind of, it's like a peek inside your
yeah.
as you're making it.
And I actually had to edit these a lot because sometimes there's multiple versions that I keep on them. So then it would show all that as well. And so I would cut those parts out just so it made sense.
Tell us a bit about your use of color, because I noticed these really striking neon colors. You've got a lot of like earth tones, but then you'll come into sort of these neons, like this. I love this chartreuse and the hot pink. I'm gonna click over here to show people more of your work.
That one will have audio.
People will have to come back on their own. You can dive into this.
You can, yeah, the little one up in the corner and the one right in the middle lower part don't have audio.
Okay, zoom in. Yeah, the texture.
So, yeah, with color, like I'm obsessed with color. I just love color. But I do love that like juxtaposition of like a khaki or grayish with like a neon like chartreuse like color. I think it just is a really fun element. Yeah, but I mean, I've been lately, like, so with a lot of these pieces, you can see there's a lot of pink, which is probably always a favorite color of mine, but definitely last year I was using a lot of pink, and I don't know if it was probably just because of, you know, wanting to look at a color that was, you know, reassuring and light and like happy. So a lot of that got incorporated into my work.
Yeah, that makes total sense. And you said a lot of these works take a long time to create just because I'm sure all the layers of paint that has to dry. Are you working with acrylic or oil or a combination, or how long did this piece take?
Well, it's mainly all acrylic is what I work in. I will then also use ink and gouache, and I do watercolors and then charcoal. And I've recently started using flash. I don't use oil just because I don't really have the space for that. And I do have some spray paint, but again, I can't do that in my studio. I have to take it outside to do it, which doesn't always allow for. But yeah, I will be working on several pieces at a time. So like once one's drying, I'll go like to another one, and then I can add the next layer later on. But yeah, they'll take, I mean, some come quicker, some don't. But generally, I don't know, they can take like that one couple months maybe.
Mm, wow. Yeah, they're so, I really encourage everyone to come back and, zoom in on all of these works, specifically all of the artists. There's so many great things going on. For this one here,
You can click it. It doesn't have audio, but it'll be
Okay.
video. Maybe if it plays. Oh, there it goes. And it's just a little time lapse, and it's kind of zoomed in of me actually painting it. I have a video I put together of that has, it's better because making videos for these, they have to be the exact size of the painting, otherwise it will auto distort it to fit in, and it was
right.
looking weird. So so that's why it's cropped very close up. But yeah, I like to do lots of different medias.
Yeah, no, this is cool to see. So I definitely see a face there, which is that there in the final image, or did that get covered up?
It's covered up, but yeah, that was on purpose, intentional. A lot of times I just really enjoy that sort of hiding or having that like base thing being there as an essence, and then kind of obscuring it, that sort of thing.
This is so cool. I'm gonna click out so people can see. Let's see if I go.
It'll stay on that. That's fine though. That one's audio. And it's just ambient audio on that one.
So cool. I love that you added this. This is a really neat thing.
Yeah, I like this whole matrix thing, Kuhn's matrix, is I was having a lot of fun with it. Like all the options and stuff, like because I used to do I used to design rugs, and we had I did similar sort of programs, so it was fun.
Yeah, it helps people to see a sense of scale and like what it is that you're looking at, because this is a huge booth. I want to say it's like 20 feet wide, so it's
No, this is the small one. I don't, is it the same size, the small one? I did the small one.
But compared to our fair,
oh
like,
yeah, way bigger.
This is definitely it makes everything look slightly smaller than it is, but all of these are so great. Well, this has been so fun, Justin. Thank you so much. And yeah, everyone, definitely be sure to visit each of these artists. You can book a video chat with them using Vectera, sign their guest book, and check out all of their work. I want to invite all the artists to come back, and I'm going to stop sharing here so we can all take any questions. If anyone has any questions for the artists, you can either add them in the chat, or you can let us know. Do you guys have any questions to each other? You can unmute yourselves if you want that, because I've noticed as we're all talking, Justin, you're working with elements of printmaking, which of course is different but related to what Anna, you're doing, and then Anna and Ralph are both documenting things like moments in time through wildly different ways. So it's just kind of fun to see, you're exploring things tangentially related, but then the actual artworks are so wildly different. So it's always cool to see.
Well, I just wanted to say, yeah, I appreciated hearing both of you guys speak about your work. It was very inspiring and like adds that element now that I like can really connect with it. Yeah, it was great.
Yeah, I think it was also kind of cool because we all kind of had similar, like Ralph and I both spent time in London. Justin and I both went to school in Baltimore. I was at Goucher College up the road. So I think that's really cool as well. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, thank you guys all so much. This is fabulous learning more about your work. I'm so happy to be sharing them in the fair, and I can't wait for us all to be together at the live event soon, where people will really get up close and personal. But for now, this is a fun way to kind of dive in and get to know you and your works more. So thank you so much. And As I said, Anna is in room 3 and Ralph and Justin are in room 1, so you can find them. And yeah, have a great rest of your day, guys. And thank you so much.
Great.
Thank you.
Thanks, Nicole.
Bye.